Today I'm going to talk about a document that most people would never read in their entire life. It is old, it is bureaucratic, it is uncomfortable, and that's why exactly it matters. Because this document exposes something deeper than espionage, it exposes how powerful institutions behave when they are afraid of being wrong. So, about the document is it is a top secret CIA counterintelligence assessment. Examination of the bona fides of KGB defector Yuri Ivanovich Nosenko. It is clearly written here in the first page only. This was not written for the public, or not for the Congress, not for the history books. It was written for internal survival. Its purpose was totally simple. Was Yuri Nosenko telling the truth, or was the CIA facing a Soviet deception operation at the highest level? This was after the JFK assassination. Nosenko was not just another defector. Defector in Hindi totally means as Dal Badlu. Yuri Nosenko was not a border guard, he was not a clerk, not a low level source. He claimed to be a KGB counterintelligence officer with knowledge of Soviet internal security, with access to sensitive operational files. But one claim made him explosive. He claimed direct knowledge of Lee Harvey Oswald, and that changed everything. Because if Nosenko was telling the truth, then the KGB had no operational interest in Oswald. But if he was lying, then the CIA was being actively manipulated during one of the most sensitive periods in American history, the aftermath of JFK assassination. So understand this clearly. This case was never been about Nosenko alone, it was about whether the CIA itself was blind. Before that, who was Oswald? Lee Harvey Oswald was a former US Marine operative who assassinated JFK in 1963, and he was also killed by a hotel owner, which is a completely another story. I will cover this all in another brief video. I will also touch the declassified files by the CIA, but let's now focus on this CIA assessment file. So let's discuss about the mindset inside the CIA. Now here's the part people miss. The CIA does not approach the case neutrally. At the time, counterintelligence doctrine was dominated by one belief: the KGB does not make mistakes. CIA was hell afraid of KGB. They think KGB does not make mistakes. So, if a Soviet officer defected and his story was not perfect, that imperfection itself became proof of deception. That is critical, because once you adopt that mindset, every contradiction confirms a theory and no evidence can falsify it. What this document actually does. This report is methodical, almost cold. It dissects Nosenko's life piece by piece: his childhood, his education, his access inside Soviet institution. You can find his childhood here. Nosenko completed the ninth class in June 1944 at the Moscow Mining Institute, and when the Leningrad Naval Preparatory School returned to Leningrad from Baku, he resumed his studies there. His travel history, his foreign contacts, his defection behavior, his response under interrogation, his psychological profile. Psychological profiling is one of the most important thing intelligence of intelligence agency does for any defector, for any victim, for any person. Even psychological profiling was are made for the leaders, for the other country's leader. Giving example of right now, it is 22 December right now. Some days ago, President Putin of Russia has come to India. So RNAW also made a psychological profiling of him, how he was handling the question, how he was responding to every situation, about his body language and all. This is intelligence work at its most serious. Talking about the document, but seriousness does not guarantee correctness. Yes, we can see Nosenko made some mistakes. He misremembered dates. He exaggerated his responsibilities. He contradicted himself on details. At first glance, that looks damning. But here, what professional analysis matters. The report eventually reaches a quiet realization: these inconsistencies were tactical, not strategic. A false defector sent by the KGB would be carefully trained, internally consistent, disciplined under pressure, designed to cause damage. Nosenko was none of this. He was messy, emotional, defensive, human. And what matters? And that also matters. So we can see clearly there was a distinction between his dates. Nosenko has said at various times that the institute course was one of the 4 years duration, and that he entered the Naval RU on graduation in 1949. That it was 4 years duration, and that because he failed a state examination he was graduated later in 1950. That it was of 5 years duration, and he graduated in 1950 on schedule, and that it was of 5 years duration, but he failed an examination which delayed his graduation for 3 months. We can find contradictions everywhere. The most important evidence: what did not happen. Now listen carefully, focus on the document, and focus on my words. Despite years of interrogation, despite years of access, Nosenko did not expose CIA operations, compromise agents, redirect policy in Moscow's favor, trigger KGB follow-on actions. In counterintelligence, absence of damage is evidence. I am repeating again. In counterintelligence, absence of damage is evidence. A deception agent exists to create outcomes. Nosenko created confusion, but confusion alone is not operational success. And I'm also having a psychological assessment. The report includes psychiatric evaluation. It finds stress, anxiety, emotional instability, fear, defensive behavior. But something is missing in the document, that is control. In the psychological profiling, false defectors are trained to withstand isolation. They are trained to absorb pressure. They are trained not to break. Nosenko broke. In this document, it is clearly written Nosenko broke. And that breakdown was consistent with detention, not deception. And the CIA's most uncomfortable conclusion: after years of suspicion, after years of isolation, years of harsh treatment, the CIA reaches its conclusion: there is no convincing evidence that Yuri Nosenko was a dispatched KGB deception agent. Notice the tone. It is not confident, not proud, not celebratory. It is cautious, restrained, reluctant. That tone tells you everything. And what the case was really. This document is not just about espionage. It reveals how institutions behave when certainty collapses. They don't lie, they hesitate, they delay, they restrict circulation, they soften conclusions. Truth is not destroyed, it is contained. truth is oftenly contained. And why this is a suppressed intelligence? Here is the uncomfortable reality. Admitting error threatens authority. So instead of openly correcting course, files are restricted, reviews are delayed, conclusions are buried in technical language. Time is allowed to pass. This is suppression without conspiracy, suppression by inertia. Why this still matters today? Every modern intelligence failure follow this pattern. Early certainty, confirmation bias, resistance to correction, quite closer. The Nosenko case survives only because someone finally wrote it down honestly. Too late to undo the damage, but enough to change or leave a record. And my assessment, my final thought, if there is one lesson to take from this document, it is this. Intelligence agencies are not machines for truth. They are human institutions managing fear under pressures run by humans. And when fear threatens authority, truth does not vanish, it simply stops being allowed to matter. It simply stops being allowed to matter. Thank you.